a lot has been said about what's happening in Southern California relative to the fires down there. It's just been horrific. It's just almost too hard to get your brain around it and to understand it. And yet thousands upon thousands of people have been impacted by it, and thousands of homes have been lost. Very timely for us to get back with us today, Gregory Wrightstone. He's a geologist, the executive director of the CO2 Coalition, expert reviewer for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the best-selling author of Inconvenient Facts. His latest book is entitled A Very Convenient Warming: How Modest Warming and More CO2 Are Benefiting Humanity. There's a picture of the cover of the book. His website is convenientwarming.com. Gregory, good to see you again. And I have to say, from our last visit, we had enormous response to you.
Well, I hope it was good.
It was, you know, and I wouldn't send you the bad stuff anyway, but it was all good. So thanks for your time. The big thing that's come out of the LA fire, one of the big things is, oh, this is a cause of climate change. What's your take?
Oh, that's ludicrous. It's easy to point at this and make claims, but the science, the facts, and the data just don't support that. And in fact, this was a naturally driven fire that was exacerbated by man-made issues. And let's just go back. We just published at the CO2 Coalition. You can find our article and commentary on this published and written by Jim Steele, who's one of our fire experts from San Diego. And he tells of, in that area, we have these Santa Ana winds that originate up in the high, cold, dry deserts in Nevada, and then they're sucked in. There's a low pressure system off into the Pacific, a high pressure system to the east that's driving these winds that start. And as they go down from the high elevations through the canyons, they're accelerating. As they're dropping, they gain heat, a lot of heat, and become much, much drier. So by the time they get to Los Angeles or that area, they're moving at a pretty good clip. And this Santa Ana wind from last week were some of the highest we've seen since probably 2010. And so these high, dry winds just need a spark. And Jim talks about what he calls 1-hour fuels and 10-hour fuels. And the 1-hour fuels are things like grasses and brush. These things dry out in as little as 60 minutes. And then the 10-hour fuels are the little bit bigger branches and of twigs, but they can dry out in 10 hours. And so you can have a rainfall and then quickly have that dry out. And that's what we saw. Actually, precipitation over the last couple of years has actually increased. And what that has done is increase vegetation growth of these 1-hour fuels primarily. And so we have a large increase of vegetation. It dries out, and it's just susceptible to these high winds. And the high winds, of course, knock over transformers or power lines. And we know that some of these fires were intentionally set by arsonists for whatever reason, I don't know. And so that's one of the man-made causes, was they didn't cull the area of the vegetation. Even the Indians, back before we settled the area, used fire to cut back the growth of these 1-hour fuels. And so when this wind comes through, I'm not sure even if they had all the water they wanted that it would have been prevented. It would have helped, of course, but these nearly 100-mile-an-hour winds and the excess of vegetation was just, it was ripe for just this situation. We've been predicting this for the last year and a half, that the vegetation growth, boy, the next drought comes, it's going to be bad, and it was. So this is mostly a naturally driven fire, but it's been exacerbated by poor management of both our forests and the grasslands. There really should be a large buffer around any suburban areas. Buffer by meaning get those grasses and shrubs cut down, and that's what they need to do. In fact, if you look at the forest, the Sierra Conservancy tells us that the forests have 4 to 5 times too many trees per acre. than what a healthy forest would. What's that mean? You've got 4 to 5 times as many trees competing for that same scarce soil moisture. So more trees means more fuel, a larger and more intense fire, and then it's going to have drier soil because we got all these trees competing for the soil moisture. And then think about that too. They stopped the logging of these forests back in the 80s. Remember the spotted owl and
Right.
the Clinton administration. And so they stopped logging in the national forest for the most part. So now the logging roads that they used to use to get to the fires when they cropped up with equipment are grown up. They can't do it. The only way to get into these fires now is airdrop, and you can't get the heavy equipment they need. So again, I'll say it's a naturally driven fire that's exacerbated by us not doing the right thing. And one easy thing, I moved recently from Pittsburgh to Florida. And in Pittsburgh, we have Mount Washington. It's a very, very steep hill on the side of Pittsburgh. And the city of Pittsburgh would bring a guy he's got a small herd of goats. And they would let the goats go for a couple of weeks. Then they'd cut back, they'd eat the brush. Now, there's a great organic solution, isn't it? To getting rid of the shrubs and do it at low expense as well. So that's just one out of the box idea to cut back the shrubs.
Well, we here in Oregon and in other parts of the West, we've seen this for quite some time, and we're trying to increase wild horse expansion and let them go into the forest and eat that underbrush. Not to mention to increase the deer and the elk population, they do the same thing. It's everything you want in a forest, but at the same time, we need to be harvesting and leaving trees that can grow and produce. But it all got shut down because of all this crazy, environmental stuff that has never been backed by any empirical evidence. It's just all emotion. Now, I remember 3 weeks ago now, that the meteorologists in Southern California were predicting this was coming. They saw the long-range forecast, and they said, hey, wait a minute, the scenario was building here that this is coming, the conditions, and these were going to be massive winds. It reminded us, I don't know if you know this, Gregory, but in our own backyard, we had the same thing happen several years ago. We had 40-mile-an-hour winds, 2% humidity, and 2 towns burned to the ground in 48 hours.
Yeah, when you get those conditions, it's tough. The best thing you could do is do controlled burns at times of high humidity, and not when it's arid, not when it's dry. But these controlled burns have been used for thousands of years by the Native Americans that lived in the West. We need to get back to doing more of those. Those were shut down by the Biden administration recently because he was afraid that, well, if we do a controlled burn and it gets away, we're going to be blamed for it. And so what we see here is really, it's incompetence on both the local, the state, and the federal levels.
Yeah.
The local and state with cutting back on fire. The mayor there cut back, I think, $17 million from the fire department. Again, reservoirs not being filled, reservoirs not being constructed. They were given the money to do it, and they've yet to build one. It's the government just doing what they always do. They get in the way, and they're not very efficient.
A couple quick questions. I only have you one segment. Let me ask you this. Do you think the big picture now, more and more people are waking up to the craziness of climate change? I mean, climate change versus conservation management, 2 different issues. But, I mean, do you think that the bogusness of climate change, some of the people in the science industry, if I can put that, meteorological industry, are they waking up to the fact that this is a crazy thing?
Well, I'm not seeing it in the science because if your salary depends on promoting this lie of a man-made climate crisis, then you'll probably continue lying about it, and it's hard to walk away from that. If you do tell the truth, you're going to reap the scorn of your colleagues. You won't be invited to the right dinners. You may, if you're lucky and you're a professor, all that will happen is you get your funding taken away from you. You'll be lucky if you're not fired if you don't toe the company line on climate change. But I do say the great unwashed across America. I see it almost on a daily basis of more and more and more people questioning this climate crisis narrative, and we see it. People are awakening because they're being told you're going to have your electricity costs reduced, and they're going up. The grid is not secure, and it's not reliable. We're relying on wind and solar when we know that the wind doesn't blow all the time, and the sun doesn't shine all the time.
Right.
So I'm very optimistic of what I see getting the truth out there, and I think things like the Trump administration is really just catalyzing this movement away from climate alarmism.
One last question. Your new book, what's the walkaway you want people to have from very convenient warming?
Oh, by almost every metric we look at, we find that Earth's ecosystems are thriving and prospering, and humanity is benefiting from the combination of modest warming and more CO2. I call it the greatest untold story of the 21st century, that of a thriving planet and a thriving and improving of the human condition. It's, fear sells, and that's why they're creating this climate of fear. But no, the life is good and getting better. That's the summary of this book, and the whole book is predicated on that. And also, human history tells us that the warm periods, warmer than today, were hugely beneficial to mankind. It was the cold periods that were horrific.
All right, The Very Convenient Warming is the book. Check it out. And there's a picture of the cover on the book by Gregory Wrightstone, and that's also his website, convenientwarming.com. Check that out. I think you'll find that to be very resourceful. Wish I had more time with you. We'll get you back. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your work. Stay in there, buddy.
Thank you.
Okay.